Following months of criticism, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is finally starting to change her tune on immigration. The incident serves as an important reminder as to why it's important to hold our leaders to account. Holding a Conservative politician to account does not mean you hope for a Liberal or NDP government. Instead, it means you hope they actually enact the common sense Conservative policies that will create a popular government and will ensure re election in the future. I'm Rachel Parker, and you're watching the Alberta Roundup. All right, everyone, and for this very important story today, I caught up with my colleague Isaac Lamoureux. As some of you know, he does most of the Alberta coverage. I was able to do a little interview with him to talk about this brewing story about Alberta and immigration, and he's going to give us the breakdown as to what happened with the Premier this week. We'll go to him now. Hey everyone, so joining me today to discuss is my colleague Isaac Lamoureux. As you guys know, Isaac has taken over much of the Alberta coverage. In my absence, I'm obviously still doing this show and doing a little bit, but as many of you know, I've had a baby, and so Isaac has been filling in, and he primarily does the Alberta coverage right now. Isaac, I wanted to have you on today to discuss what is really a brewing controversy in Alberta right now. Danielle Smith's base and Conservatives sort of writ large are very unhappy with her proposals regarding immigration. She, a few months ago said she wanted to double Alberta's population by 2050. She's come under a lot of fire for that. Our colleague Corey Morgan over at the Western Standard had the opportunity to ask her if this was still her plans, given the controversy surrounding it. Let's just play this clip now so the audience has a chance to see exactly what we're talking about. Seems like Danielle Smith is backtracking. Take a listen to her answer for yourself.
My thinking about it was that we're already growing at 200,000 a year based on those numbers. So if you just do the math, by 25 years, it would be 5 million population. And I have often thought that we would have more political clout if we had a higher population than Quebec. But what I'm seeing, and I'm doing a lot of roundtables and town halls across the province, people are worried. People are very nervous about our ability to be able to keep up with that pace of growth. And I think we're beginning to see it. So I'm listening to people. I'm having to recalibrate a little bit on what our aspirations should be. I think what we really need is a sensible immigration policy, similar to what we had under Stephen Harper, where we had a point system for bringing people in. We made sure that newcomers matched the economic needs of our economy. We made sure that we had a level of newcomers coming to our country that matched our ability to keep up with housing. And I think what we're seeing is that, especially in Alberta, we're beginning to feel some of the pressure of that growth. And I think that that's what people are responding to.
So, Isaac, this is a pretty sizable change from the Premier, who's always been pretty pro-immigration. What do you think is marking this change in policy?
Well, several things, I think. And interestingly, that short clip you showed from their roughly 15-minute interview kind of covered most of the things they discussed, which was a nice surprise. But firstly, I should say Smith basically said, look, if we just continue on our numbers, as she said in the clip, we will reach 5 million. So this isn't a stretch that I'm doing. But one thing she talked about, of course, was education and that they just don't have enough schools for the amount of students that are coming into the education stream, and that obviously schools take multiple years to build. So this isn't something you can do overnight per se. But she talked about all the social services can't handle the level of immigration that we're currently experiencing, that being healthcare, education. I mean, the list goes on. If people use it and it's free, put those quotations there, because obviously the taxpayers are paying for it, then those things will get overrun if our immigration is out of control.
The Premier was also asked, people are concerned about whether immigrants coming to Canada and to Alberta specifically are assimilating properly. Obviously, there's heightened stress over that right now. A lot of people are looking at the situation in the UK very warily and wondering if something like that could happen in Canada. And the Premier was asked about this as well. What was her response to that?
Yeah, obviously she drew on what's happening on the UK as a concern, though she didn't see the very many similarities happening in Alberta. The key example she gave was that 70,000 Ukrainians immigrated here fleeing the war, and she said only 1,700 of them are on any form of social assistance. So, I mean, she didn't talk about the general numbers, so I don't know how that compares to other immigrants, but I mean, 1,700 out of 70,000 doesn't seem too bad to me, with obviously most of the Ukrainian immigrants contributing to society.
For sure. I think that's a really good point as well. I think people want to see immigrants who are settling in Alberta and in Canada working. I think they want to see, them having jobs when they come here and not living off of social welfare. One of the probably most important questions that Corey asked the premier was if there's going to be more policies coming for immigration and if she'll be advocating for more policies, federal policies on immigration. What did the premier have to say about that?
Yeah, this was really interesting to me in that she was, I guess, unsurprisingly, very critical of the federal government. She said that, look, they've let the immigration system on all streams really get out of control. But something that took me by surprise, I suppose, was that she said that Canada should strive towards finding a 1% of the population target. So that would be only 400,000 people, which is less than even the permanent residents we let in of 500,000 a year, let alone all the other immigration streams, that being temporary foreign workers, international students, the list goes on, illegal immigrants, which she said, and Pierre's been saying the same number, which is 1.2 million, although obviously Candice Malcolm, when she previously reported, said 2.3 million in 2023. So I don't know whose number is more accurate, but yeah, regardless, 400,000 is obviously a lot less than both of those numbers.
Yeah, and I think 400,000 is more in line with what we've been seeing in Canada, and I think would be more sustainable, especially if you consider that would be spread out over the whole country, not just the amount that Alberta itself is absorbing. Isaac, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Rachel. It was a pleasure.
Okay, everyone, taking a look at our next story here. The Alberta RCMP believe the remaining suspect involved in last week's shooting that killed a Rocky View County employee and a young father is still in Alberta. Police told us this on Thursday. Mounties are also ramping up communication. I believe this was in response to public outcry over their poor response to the shooting in the initial aftermath and in the certainly initial hours and days when the public had so little information about what was going on and whether they needed to shelter inside. RCMP Staff Sergeant Mark Wielges said Thursday that police still believe that 28-year-old Elijah Blake Strawberry remains inside Alberta borders. While the fatal shooting near Chestermere was not targeted, Wielges said Albertans should, quote, take some solace that there is no indication that he actively targeting the public. However, he is armed and dangerous and should not be approached. I personally am not terribly reassured by that. If I was in the Calgary-Chestermere area, I would be on high alert. Still, the RCMP are trying to reassure the public, with Wielges also saying, quote, there's no information to say that Mr. Strawberry is selecting at random any members of the public to commit violence upon. That's not to discount that he's still a dangerous person. It is not a spree, so to speak, that he may be targeting other people for extreme violence at random. Strawberry's alleged accomplice, 35-year-old Arthur Wayne Penner, was arrested on Sunday by RCMP's Major Crimes Unit. Penner has been charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder and was remanded in custody with his next court appearance scheduled for Thursday in Airdrie. For those of you who are feeling rather alarmed about the situation and want to know more, the Mounties are ramping up their communications effort, as I said, so every day beginning at 3 p.m. Mountain Time, they will be giving a briefing on the situation. Moving into our controversy of the week, the Elections Alberta has found the Alberta NDP broke election finance rules during its leadership campaign earlier this year. That ruling was found following a complaint from the United Conservative Party, who alleged that the NDP was breaching Section 25 of the Election Finances and Contribution Disclosure Act, which states an annual membership fee is not to be considered a contribution. In the complaint, the UCP said that the NDP membership forms illegally equated party membership fees with contributions. It also claimed that part of the NDP constitution that stated any donation to the party over $10 is deemed a valid membership renewal broke election rules. This week, Election Commissioner Paula Hale wrote to the UCP saying Elections Alberta had concluded its investigation and found that the Alberta NDP had indeed violated the rules governing membership fees. Hale wrote, quote, based on the facts and circumstances in this case, I am of the view that the NDP was not in compliance. Specifically, in circumstances where memberships were being renewed as a result of an individual making a contribution in a subsequent year. Hale's letter added that the Alberta NDP have entered into a compliance agreement with Elections Alberta regarding its membership process to ensure continued compliance with the legislation. In a statement to the Edmonton Journal, NDP Provincial Secretary Garrett Spillici said the party appreciated the clarity on how the law is to be interpreted, adding, quote, We fully cooperated with the Commissioner's investigation, and we accept the compliance agreement completely. The Commissioner has impressed upon the party that unambiguous language to distinguish contributions from membership payment is imperative, and we accept that directive without reservation. Okay, everyone, and finally, moving into our weekly comment roundup. Last week, I extensively covered how the RCMP was being criticized for its slow response after an Alberta father was killed and a Rocky View County employee was killed and a Fortis employee was injured. And, there was a lot of concern that the RCMP had not released a photo of the suspect, had not released a description of the suspect. And many of you agreed that the RCMP's slow response time was not appropriate. Here's what some of you had to say. User Greg Novick said, quote, "How could there be no descriptions when the Fortis guy survived and was out of the hospital that night? The RCMP are pathetic." A very good point. The RCMP merely had to ask that man what he saw, and even if the description was kind of vague, because usually in traumatic incidents, people have a hard time remembering exactly what happened, any description at that point would have been better than nothing. User at Blue Moon 12 said, "I live in Wheatland County. They never gave us full information. Disgraceful. I have zero confidence in the RCMP." I do have the utmost sympathy for people who are living in the area where this shooting occurred, because as a young mother myself, I would simply be terrified to go out with my children knowing that a man had been killed near where I live and that they still had not found the alleged killer. That would be a very sobering experience, I think. Being a young mother, there's already so many concerns that you have, and then to feel like you can't even go out in public safely, that would just be very chilling for me. So certainly for those of you who are living in the area, I can understand that this would be a rather distressing time. I am glad that the RCMP is moving up to do those updates every day at 3 p.m. and I hope that that will be useful and beneficial to you all, and that you will get the information that you need. And of course, the main thing is just that this killer is found as quickly as possible. Okay, everyone, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have a great weekend. As always, if you're able, you can show us some support for our work over at donate.tnc.news. Don't forget to catch my midweek episode of Rachel in the Republic if you're interested in what is going on in the US election. I'll see you guys next week. Have a good one. God bless.